So today we're looking at Jesus' statement, I am the bread of life. To explore what he really meant by that, I'd like you to think for a moment about your favourite food. If it was your birthday, what would you choose for a special treat? Would it be a large tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream? Or perhaps your favourite box of chocolates? Or even a large slice of birthday cake? Well, I do apologise if I'm making you all hungry, but I can't imagine that any of you would select bread. But Jesus said, I am the bread of life. But why bread? Jesus didn't say, I am the ice cream of life, or I am the apple pie of life, did he? You see, all those nice things, all those special things that you've been thinking about, those are nice extras. They're optional. Though I would possibly argue that chocolate is an essential part of any diet. But seriously, your body could do without those things. They're not essential for your existence. But back in Palestine, in Jesus' day, the people couldn't possibly have imagined going a day without eating bread. It was fundamental to their diet. In the same way, if Jesus had been in China, he would have declared, I am the rice of life. It was something they couldn't imagine living without. It was essential to survival. By saying, I am the bread of life, Jesus was saying, I am fundamentally important to life. I'm not an optional extra. So that's it then. Sermon finished. Well, actually, there is a bit more to it than that. So let's dig a bit deeper. The statement Jesus makes comes from John 6:35, where he says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. So first of all, we're going to look at the situation Jesus was in when he said this, and then I'm going to answer these three questions. When Jesus said this, what did he mean? Why did many people reject Jesus as a result of this teaching? And what action does Jesus want his followers to take? So first of all, let's look at the situation. The day before, Jesus had been speaking to a huge crowd of people near Tiberias on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus had carried out an amazing miracle and had fed 5,000 people with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. And then the following day, many of those people started to look for Jesus. They were pretty impressed by him and they wanted to hear some more, so they were searching for him. They knew his disciples had left in a boat to go fishing the previous evening, but they also knew that Jesus hadn't gone with them. And when they eventually found Jesus, they found him on the other side of the Sea of Galilee in a place called Capernaum, and they found him teaching in the synagogue. And their first question to him was this: when did you get here? But Jesus chose not to answer their question. This is what he said. You were looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. So he was saying, you're not looking for me because I carried out a miracle. You're looking for me because I fed you. Now stop thinking about your stomachs and think beyond that. So after he'd said this, they asked him, well, if we're not to work for food that spoils, then what works does God want us to do? And Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he sent. And their response to this was, well, if we're going to believe in you, you need to show us a miracle. And then the miracle they start talking about was how Moses provided manna in the desert. And you can imagine Jesus' reaction. You're thinking about your stomachs again. So the people have made an automatic connection between Moses providing manna in the desert and Jesus providing them with bread. And Jesus knew that this connection would be made. So let's look in detail now at what he actually said. And the teaching does get quite complicated. He repeats the same message several times, but then he builds on it with a little bit more information each time. At its most basic, the message Jesus gave was this: bread sustains us every day and gives us energy to live. But unlike bread or manna, which you eat and are hungry again later, Jesus said that if we eat his bread, we will never go hungry. His bread will sustain us forever. His bread will not just give us life, it will give us eternal life. So think for a moment about the story when Jesus met the woman at the well. He said to her, "The water I give will become a spring of living water, welling up to eternal life." And whether Jesus is referring to bread or water, he's pointing to the fact that the physical things that we know we need to sustain us day to day are only temporary. They'll not last for the long term, but what Jesus provides will sustain us for eternity. So what were the claims that Jesus made about himself in John chapter 6? Let's look at the three of the things that he said now. And I have an illustration to show you. The work of God is this: to believe in the one he sent. I am the bread of life. I am the bread that came down from heaven. If we take these statements and put them together, this is what Jesus said. God sent me. I can give you life. I came down from heaven. The people were really unhappy about this claim that he was sent by God. And they said, how can he say he came down from heaven? I mean, we know his parents. That's impossible. And this teaching causes quite a lot of opposition in the crowd. Then Jesus continues to teach, and he moves on to hint of his own death. He says, "This bread is my flesh, which I give for the life of the world. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life. And the one who feeds on me will live because of me." So again, to summarize and put these statements together, he said, I will give up my life so that you can have eternal life. You must feed on me to gain eternal life. You may recall that he repeated this same instruction at the Last Supper when he took the bread and broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." The people didn't understand what he was saying, and even his closest disciples were confused by his teaching. It sounded crazy. What was he saying? His claims were literally out of this world. And his suggestion that they should eat his flesh and drink his blood was abhorrent. At this point, many of those who were following Jesus turned away from him because they could not accept his teaching. And when many people had left Jesus, he then turns to his 12 disciples and says to them, "Are you going to leave me too?" But Peter speaks up and says this, "To whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe that you are the Holy One of God." In other words, who else could we go to? Only you can give us eternal life. Only you are the Messiah. And looking back at Jesus's claim in verse 35, he says this, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. His instructions to his followers, come to me, believe in me, are repeated over and over again. And Peter responds directly to these instructions and says, to whom else could we go? We have come to you. We believe that you are the Holy One of God. So Jesus repeats these instructions over and over again throughout these passages. Come to me, believe in me. These are the instructions he gives to his followers. Many people in the world today have a problem with Jesus' message, just in the same way as those listening 2,000 years ago. They can't accept that he came from heaven. They can't accept that he's the Son of God. And the idea that he had to die on a cross for their sins makes no sense. In 1 Corinthians, Paul writes this, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." Christ's message makes no sense to those on the outside. It is foolishness. But to those who accept the message, we receive God's saving power. God's desire is that everyone will accept Jesus. Jesus said, "For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life." Jesus performed miracles so that people would look beyond his physical appearance and see who he really was. He challenged them to come to him, to believe in him, and to gain eternal life. Jesus said, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever." And in the same way as we eat bread to give us life, we need to believe in Jesus and he will give us life, not just for today and tomorrow, but for eternity. Bread is physical food which satisfies today. It's temporary. We need to focus beyond that to spiritual food, which will satisfy forever. Jesus said, "The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life." So I ask you, have you come to him? Do you believe that he's sent by God? Have you taken his words to your heart so that you are filled with the Spirit and life? I'm going to let you think over those questions now while we listen to a worship song. And afterwards, I'm going to tell you a parable which talks about the bread of life.